Warriors have been a constant with our species throughout the existence of our multiple societies. One could say that in a way, human beings are a species ever engaging in a sort of endemic warfare. As crudely conceived as this idea might sound, the truth of the matter is that in our history, warriors changed, adapted themselves, evolved, but never disappeared, both in times of war and of peace. Moreover, in the words of Stephen Hawking, it is perfectly rational to assume intelligent life exists somewhere in the universe. In light of this statement, as we reflect on intelligent life on other planets, we ask, what would the warriors of such alien civilizations look like? Well, we shall approach this question scientifically and academically as we look into the scintillating skies, seeking for answers. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. The idea of alien warriors is neither new nor uncommon. Extraterrestrial life, and in particular extraterrestrial intelligence, has enjoyed a major cultural impact, including works of science fiction, such as novels, films and video games, which have tried to portray what an alien warrior would look, what they would do, what sort of weapons they would have, armor, battle tactics and warrior ethics. Within our world, we have given a ginormous importance to our warriors. We dream of them, we play with them, we learn about them, we have worshipped warrior deities, and in our imagination, we have given many different possible shapes to alien warriors, making them friendly or hostile, allies or foe. Hollywood and gaming companies have given us their fair share of humanoid aliens over the years, but in order to properly understand or at least postulate, have an hypothetical alien and what it would look like, then we need to take into consideration the following points. Would extraterrestrials turn out to look similar to us, or might they take a form beyond our wildest imaginings? What level of technological advancement does this civilization have? Is war, inevitably, a part of alien civilizations? Do they have to have warriors? We can't imagine how alien warriors would be without taking into consideration how the actual species they belong to looks. Clearly, there is no way to be certain what any extraterrestrial entity might look like, but speculations on hypothetical extraterrestrials, in order to be at least somewhat coherent, must begin from the very basis of how life comes into existence, as far as we know. The looks of an alien would very much depend on the conditions of the planet which gave birth to that species. Let us not forget that we ourselves have adapted to this planet. Life adapts itself through natural selection to the conditions in which it finds itself. For instance, oxygen makes up 21% of the Earth's atmosphere and we need it to breathe. But in the original ancestral Earth there wasn't any oxygen. Oxygen has come into our atmosphere because of plants and photosynthetic bacteria, which have both changed the planet and adapted themselves to fit the planet. Originally life was anaerobic, but these early organisms would have found this environment toxic. Ancient bacteria evolved protective enzymes that prevented oxygen from damaging their DNA. In fact, there is a condition called oxygen toxicity, which is caused by exposure to oxygen at partial pressures greater than those to which the body is normally exposed to. Oxygen is necessary for cell metabolism, and the blood supplies it to all parts of the body. When oxygen is breathed at high partial pressures, a hyperoxic condition will rapidly spread, with the most vascularized tissues being most vulnerable. During times of environmental stress, levels of reactive oxygen species can increase dramatically, which can damage cell structures and produce oxidative stress. Biology tells us about life on Earth and how the characteristics of animals are defined by their environment. Look at the incredible diversity of biotypes here on Earth, all of which have evolved under the same planetary environment. Would an alien species from a completely different biochemical foundation look anything like us? Do they live in the sea, in the clouds of a gas giant? Do they live on land, in a jungle, in the desert? For intelligence, they would need a way to consume energy and a way to communicate. But how do they communicate? Is it vocal? Do they have some sort of vocal cords like us? Or do they communicate like bees through pheromones? Or perhaps phosphorescent patches? Furthermore, the size and shape of the alien will be determined by gravity, ambient density, and source of energy. Living beings evolve in response to their environment. We grew opposable thumbs so we could better grasp objects. Monkeys developed prehensile tails for the same reason. We have eyes because light breaks down into the visible end of the electromagnetic spectrum here. But if we had occurred on a completely different world, with different temperatures and topography and flora and fauna, we would have evolved differently. And if that other world had a completely different chemical composition, so would we. All life on Earth is carbon-based, and some people feel that all life in the universe has to be carbon-based, while others propose other possibilities. In my opinion, we don't have enough data to formulate a complete postulation. There might be things we don't know about the chemical composition of other planets, but perhaps we will know these in the future. Just like if we look at our scientific understanding a few hundred years ago and compare it to what we know now. I would therefore leave that door open to future evidence-based challenging of hypotheses. The carbon atom has the unique ability to form 4 strong chemical bonds with other atoms, including other carbon atoms. These covalent bonds have a direction in space, so that carbon atoms can form the skeletons of complex three-dimensional structures with definite architectures, such as nucleic acids and proteins. Carbon forms more compounds than all other elements combined. The great versatility of the carbon atom makes it the element most likely to provide the basis, even exotic ones, for the chemical composition of life on other planets. Other elements, notably sulfur and silicon, make less stable bonds at Earth-like temperatures. This again, to me, is the key part, at Earth-like temperatures. We can't rule out completely non-carbon-based life because it would strongly depend on the sort of environment and chemical composition of the host planet. Carbon-based life forms are the most likely ones, according to our current understanding of how life comes to be. You and I are 18% carbon by mass. Human cells consist of 65% to 95% water, and a significant portion of that remainder is composed of carbon-containing organic molecule. Plants are 45% carbon, black coal is 60 to 80%, anthracite coal is 97% carbon. Also, the abundance of the chemical elements is one of the reasons why carbon-based life forms are the most likely to exist. It is a measure of the occurrence of the chemical elements relative to all other elements within a given environment. The most common element in the universe is hydrogen. Helium is next, but it's chemically inert, as Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson has eloquently pointed out. Next is oxygen, next is carbon. As far as our bodies are concerned, the first element is hydrogen, the second one is oxygen, and together they form the water within you. Then you have carbon, then you have nitrogen. So we are made of the most common elements in the universe, with carbon being the most chemically fertile element in the periodic table. Life on Earth requires water as its solvent in which biochemical reactions may take place. Life based on ammonia instead of water has been suggested, although this solvent appears less suitable than water. It is also conceivable that there are forms of life whose solvent is a form of liquid hydrocarbons such as ethane, propane and methane, or perhaps there are in other planets forms of liquid solvent we don't know about. There needs to be some mechanism for storing and replicating information with moderate fidelity, such as DNA, RNA, or some analog. We all know what DNA is, but what is RNA? RNA and DNA are nucleic acids, and together with lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates form the 4 major macromolecules essential for all life forms to exist. Ribonucleic acid is a polymeric molecule essential in various biological roles, in coding, decoding, regulation and expression of genes. Like DNA, RNA is assembled as a chain of nucleotides. However, while DNA is found in nature as a paired double strand, unlike DNA, RNA is more often found in nature as a single strand folded onto itself. Cellular organisms use messenger RNA to convey genetic information that directs synthesis of specific proteins. Many viruses encode their genetic information using an RNA genome. The chemical structure of RNA is very similar to that of DNA, but it differs in several aspects. Abiogenesis is the natural process by which life arises from non-living matter. It aims to determine how pre-life chemical reactions gave rise to life on Earth. Many approaches to abiogenesis investigate how self-replicating molecules or their components came into existence. It is generally thought that current life on Earth is descended from an RNA world. However, whether RNA-based life was the first life to have existed or not is still uncertain, as alternative chemical paths to life have been proposed. The RNA world is a hypothetical phase of the evolutionary history of life on Earth, in which self-replicating RNA molecules proliferated before the evolution of DNA and proteins. Like DNA, RNA can store and replicate genetic information. Like enzymes, it can catalyze, start, or accelerate chemical reactions that are critical for life. Although RNA is fragile, the reason why DNA became the predominant storage molecule may be because it is more stable and durable than RNA. Even so, the evidence for an RNA world is strong enough that the hypothesis has gained wide acceptance. On an Earth-like planet, it is also likely that radiation from the alien sun or suns will be used in biochemical pathways as a source of energy. For moderately large multicellular primary producers, harnessing light efficiently probably necessitates a light-gathering system of leaves and branches. Similar shapes and habits have evolved convergently on Earth, so we might expect plants with broadly familiar forms on Earth-like planets. Plant-like intelligent aliens are unlikely because photosynthesis doesn't encourage complex survival strategies. The need to chase food favors mobile life. If such life evolved in a thick atmosphere, it is likely to be a horizontal creature. A thinner atmosphere would favor the most vertical creatures. What about insect-like intelligent aliens? Insects are by far the most species-rich group on Earth. Well, according to Matthew Wills, professor of evolutionary paleobiology at the Milner Center for Evolution, University of Bath, unfortunately, having your skeleton on the outside makes growth difficult and entails periodic shedding and regrowth. On Earth-like planets, all but relatively small terrestrial animals with external skeletons would collapse under their own weight during molting, and some critical size may be necessary for suitably complex brains. This is at least partly the result of walking on two legs, which frees up the front limbs, and because of the dexterity of our fingers. It may or may not be significant that humans have just 2 eyes and ears, just enough for stereo vision and hearing, and just 2 legs, reduced from the initially more stable 4. Many other organs also come in pairs as a consequence of our evolutionary deep-seated and perhaps inevitable bilateral symmetry. The fact that we have hands and feet with 5 digits is a consequence of the fixation on 5 in our early tetrapod ancestors. Close relatives experimented with 7 or 8. According to Bernard Bates, physics professor at the University of Puget Sound, an octopus is a good example of an advanced alien analog on Earth. Octopuses are quite intelligent and live in a totally alien environment compared with ours. Evolution has had to find novel solutions to the pressures they're under, pressures completely different than those that shaped mammals on land. He also states, aliens with advanced technology would have to be on land. Technology needs fire to kickstart it. What we would expect in order to develop a technology comparable to ours. Hands with fingers for delicate, precise manipulations are important. One is the opposable thumb. You need a tentacle, a claw, and opposable thumb in order to manipulate the environment. So that's one of the ingredients of intelligence, to be able to change the world around you. At least 2 legs are needed for locomotion. If it has 4 legs, think of centaurs. You need those hands to build things. Your survival chances improve if you can use all of the ways you can to detect food, mates, and predators. Living in an atmosphere means sounds and smells will arrive before predators. Eyesight is also an important requirement for intelligence. In the words of Dr. Michiko Kaku, we ourselves have the eyesight of a predator. We have eyes to the front of our face, not to the side of our face. And why? Animals with eyes to the front of their face are predators, lions, tigers, and foxes. Animals with eyes to the side of their face are prey, and they're not as intelligent. Like a rabbit. We say dumb bunny and smart as a fox. Because the fox is a predator, it has to learn how to ambush. It has to learn how to have stealth, camouflage. It has to psych out the enemy and anticipate the motions of the enemy that it is its prey. If you're a dumb bunny, all you have to do is run. 3 things are generally intrinsic about human beings. We think we know everything. We think everything is about us. We need things to be about us in order to care. Thus, in most of our stories about aliens, the aliens come because of us. Be it to kill, enslave, or study us, or to take things that are dear to us. We are also usually the first to make contact with the aliens, and they almost always look something like us, or like something familiar to us. Talking and reacting to alien behavior will be the hardest. We already struggle to keep patient enough to understand other cultures and differences within our own human cultures. Dolphins, octopuses, these all seem to be higher order thinkers, yet we cannot communicate well with them, nor do we particularly share the planet well. What will an alien encounter be like? How will their actions seem? In short, I'd assume things will be easily misunderstood, as we all come with an existing load of baggage about such an encounter. and their actions will depend a great deal on the environment they come from and the nature of their groups. Are they solitary, or prefer herds or small bands? What would be the mind of an intelligent predator who normally lives alone? Creatures like us, and yet so different from us, can barely understand them. According to Harry E. Keller, chemistry professor, Northeastern University, first, a real alien is bilaterally symmetrical, endothermic, with excellent manipulative abilities. Eyes, of course. You have to see to build a civilization. The squid has better eyes than we do, and the eye seems to have evolved separately a few times, at least. Our alien will have eyes that may only resemble ours superficially. A lens and iris are almost an absolute requirement. The whites do not have to be white, neither does the iris have to be colored in anything like the way ours are. How many eyes? One just will not do. An ability to perceive distance will lead to rapid extinction, unless you can find a good reason for it. Extra eyes create evolutionary baggage and will not persist, spiders notwithstanding. Do you know what a red dwarf is? Oh, no, none of that nonsense. It's a kind of star. As a matter of fact, it's the most common star in the universe. So what would a planet orbiting a red dwarf star look like, and what would the sort of life living on that planet look like? Well, Dr. Chu has something to say about this. The stars are faint and relatively cool, and if one of its planets sits in its habitable zone, the region around a host star that is not too hot or too cold, then it is a candidate for hosting life. Dr. Brian Chu from the School of Biological Science at Flinders University, Australia, may have given us our most logical expectation of what life on other planets might look like. Harsh surface conditions could drive plants underground, like mushrooms. Most of its anatomy may be out of sight, protected from the winds, heat and radiation. He added, the fleshy body of this plant is mostly underground, save for the spectacular rosette of petals that trap moisture and, with the aid of symbiotic microbes, harness sunlight. And animals would be amphibian-like and evolved to survive in desert-like conditions, as plants could be scarce, he said. They would be armed with a protective shell on their backs to block out the harsh heat from the sun and wind-blown debris. Strong front legs would also be a necessity to help dig into the surface as they search for food, with a mouth beneath its head to make it easy to eat the small plants that could litter the surface of the planet. It adds that they could have transparent skin, as red dwarf stars emit a smaller spectrum of radiation. Animals are likely to have translucent flesh, which will capture as much light as possible. Professor Matthew Williams adds, open quote, with few exceptions, animals either eat the primary producers or each other. And there are only so many ways of doing this. Pursuing food often necessitates moving with the mouth first, so the animal has a head and a tail end. Teeth and probably jaws evolved to hold and tackle food items. Moving against a hard surface requires specialized structures at the interface so that there is a back and front side. Typically, this also imparts bilateral left-right symmetry. Indeed, most animals belong to the supergroup called the bilateral. So the appearance of these aliens will greatly depend on their place of origin. So if you're talking about extraterrestrial life, then it will be tremendously different from us. In the words of Dr. Richard Dawkins, as he was counting up the number of separate arisings of evolutionary traits, if we look at the animal kingdom and count up the number of times some things have evolved, eyes several dozen times, ears quite a large number of times, echolocation, that's finding your way around by sonar, only 4 times, hypodermic syringes, stingers, about a couple of dozen times. But if we focus on intelligent alien life, if it is an Earth-like environment, they will probably resemble us to a certain extent. However, still taking into consideration the huge differences we ourselves have between members of the same human species. Hence, colors and shapes will differ. If the place of origin of such race is instead greatly different from our own, the being living on such planet would surpass all of our wildest dreams. Their bodies might not be entirely visible or recognizable to us. We might not have the mental capacity to understand their true form. When we consider that 95% of the universe is not perceptible by our senses or technology, the ultimate question is, would we even perceive them? When trying to imagine what alien warriors would be like, we of course have to imagine the sort of weapons and armor they would be using. But in order to do that, we should first assess what type of civilization we are talking about. Here is where we utilize the Kardashev scale. The Kardashev scale is a method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement, based on the amount of energy a civilization is able to use for communication. It was proposed in 1964 by the Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev. The scale has 3 designated categories. A Type 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all of the energy which reaches its planet from its parent star. A Type 2 civilization, also called a stellar civilization, can harness the total energy of its planet's parent star, the most popular hypothetical concept being the Dyson sphere, a device which would encompass the entire star and transfer its energy to the planet. A Type 3 civilization, also called a galactic civilization, can control energy on the scale of its entire host galaxy. So which type of civilization are we? We are not even a Type 1. We are Type 0. We still haven't reached that state. Type 1 is planetary. They control their planet entirely. If the alien warriors we were to encounter happen to be a Type 0 civilization, then we could find all sorts of possible scenarios. Think of all the different weapons and armor we have used in our short time on this planet. Depending on the technological level, these aliens might be using primitive rudimental weapons, made with materials which are abundant on their planet. These weapons might work on their planets, but might not work as well on ours and vice versa, because they would be made specifically to work within their gravity and to harm their bodies. Ipso facto, their armor would be designed to withstand their weapons specifically, and it would be shaped in a way as to give better protection to the parts of the body of these aliens which are deemed more important for survival. So once again, the biology of such creatures would play a fundamental role in the form and functionality of this alien armor. So the weapons and armor of a Type 1 civilization will be similar to what we have now, as scientists predicted that we will reach Type 1 status in about 100 years. So an alien warrior belonging to a Type 1 civilization will have the ability to use weapons of mass destruction. Type 2 is stellar. The machines produced by such civilization are energized by the power of their star, so it would be reasonable to think their weapons and armor would be too. Type 3 is galactic. They harvest the energy and power of billions of stars. A Type 3 civilization warrior would have weapons so advanced it could literally wipe out less advanced civilizations and their warriors. We would not be talking about war anymore. We would be talking about genocide. Just to give some examples, Star Trek and the Federation of Planets would be considered a Type 2 civilization, while the Empire in Star Wars would be a Type 3. Notwithstanding the fact that the guns always miss, and the armors don't stop anything. The mathematics tells us that there should be thousands of Type 1, 2 and 3 civilizations, and yet we see no evidence for it. Why is that? Dr. Michiko Kaku stated that the transition between Type 0 to Type 1 civilization is the most dangerous one. It's a critical point, because on one hand we have the forces of integration, tolerance and multicultural fabric, which will lead us to reach Type 1 status. And on the other hand we have nuclear weapons, germ warfare and terrorism, which are obstacles which hinder planetary progress. A Type 0 civilization may never make it to Type 1, as it could potentially self-destroy. Interestingly enough, this reminds me of the Drake equation. In 1961, University of California, Santa Cruz, astronomer and astrophysicist Frank Drake devised the Drake equation as a way to stimulate scientific dialogue at a meeting on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The Drake equation is a probabilistic argument used to estimate the number of active communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. The equation is best understood not as an equation in the strictly mathematical sense, but to summarize all the various concepts which scientists must contemplate when considering the question of life elsewhere. The Drake equation has proved controversial since several of its factors are uncertain and based on conjecture, not allowing conclusions to be made. This had led critics to label the equation as guesstimate, or even meaningless. Based on observations from the Hubble Space Telescope, there are between 125 and 250 billion galaxies in the observable universe. It is estimated that at least 10% of all Sun-like stars have a system of planets. Even if it is assumed that only 1 out of a billion of these stars has planets supporting life, there would be some 6.25 billion life-supporting planetary systems in the observable universe. A 2013 study, based on results from the Kepler spacecraft, estimated that the Milky Way contains at least as many planets as it does stars, resulting in 100 to 400 billion exoplanets. Also based on Kepler data, scientists estimate that at least 1 in 6 stars has an Earth-sized planet. The apparent contradiction between high estimates of the probability of the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations and the lack of evidence of such civilizations is known as the Fermi Paradox. The Fermi Paradox, or Fermi's Paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, is the apparent contradiction between the lack of evidence and high probability estimate. Exempli gratia, those given by the Drake equation for the existence of extraterrestrial civilization. The basic points of the argument made by physicist Enrico Fermi and Michael H. Hart are: there are billions of stars in the galaxy that are similar to the Sun, many of which are billions of years older than Earth. With high probability, some of these stars will have Earth-like planets, and if the Earth is typical, some might develop intelligent life. Some of these civilizations might develop interstellar travel, a step the Earth is investigating now. Even at the slow pace of currently envisioned interstellar travel, the Milky Way galaxy could be completely traversed in a few million years. According to this line of reasoning, the Earth should have already been visited by extraterrestrial aliens. Fermi noted no convincing evidence of this, leading him to ask, where is everybody? There have been many attempts to explain the Fermi Paradox, primarily either suggesting that intelligent extraterrestrial life is extremely rare or proposing reasons that such civilizations have not contacted or visited Earth. Here are some examples. They are too alien. A possibility is that human theoreticians have underestimated how much alien life might differ from that on Earth. Aliens may be physiologically unwilling to attempt to communicate with human beings. Perhaps human mathematics is parochial to Earth and not shared by other life, though others argue this can only apply to abstract math, since the math associated with physics must be similar in results, if not in methods. Physiology might also cause a communication barrier. Carl Sagan speculated that an alien species might have a thought process orders of magnitude slower or faster than ours. A message broadcast by that species might well seem like random background noise to us, and therefore go undetected. Another thought is that technological civilizations invariably experience a technological singularity and attain a post-biological character. Hypothetical civilizations of this sort may have advanced drastically enough to render communication impossible. Post-biological evolution is a form of evolution which has transitioned from a biological paradigm driven by the propagation of genes to a non-biological paradigm, presumably driven by some alternative replicator, and potentially resulting in the extinction, obsolescence, reorganization of the former. Researchers anticipating a post-biological universe tend to describe this transition as marked by the maturation and potential convergence of high technologies, such as artificial intelligence or nanotechnology. The possible forms a PBC may take are as diverse as in biological evolution, if not more. The move to a complete post-biological stage has two different routes. One route is the change of human consciousness from a biological vessel into a mechanical. This would require the digitization of human consciousness. A mechanical-based vessel would increase the computational power and intelligence of the human consciousness exponentially, and also eliminate the weakness of a biological form. This route is therefore a logical progression through cultural evolution, with survival and the pursuit of knowledge and intelligence at its center. But of course, it would still have its limits, one of which would be heat dispersion. The Planetarium hypothesis, conceived in 2001 by Stephen Baxter, attempts to provide a solution to the Fermi paradox by holding that our astronomical observation represents an illusion created by a Type 3 civilization. He postulates that we do not see evidence of extraterrestrial life because the universe has been engineered so that it appears empty of other life. The technological singularity is the hypothesis that the invention of artificial superintelligence will abruptly trigger runaway technological growth, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. According to this hypothesis, an upgradable intelligent agent, such as computer-running software-based artificial general intelligence, would enter a runaway reaction of self-improvement cycles, with each new and more intelligent generation appearing more and more rapidly, causing an intelligence explosion and resulting in a powerful superintelligence that would, qualitatively, far surpass all human intelligence. Emeritus Professor of Computer Science at San Diego State University and science fiction author Vernor Vinge said in his 1993 essay, The Coming Technological Singularity, that this would signal the end of the human era, and the new superintelligence would continue to upgrade itself and would advance technologically at an incomprehensible rate. Now, expanding a little bit on this concept of extraterrestrial life, and human life for that matter, reaching this state of mechanical or digitalized existence. All of this if we manage to overcome the problem of silicon being unstable at a molecular level. In fact, transistors can get ever so small and powerful, but they also will produce an extreme amount of heat, which will eventually melt the chips having basically the electrons leak out because of the principle called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Hence, we are looking at optical computers, quantum computers, DNA computers, protein computers, all sorts of different kinds of architecture, down to the molecular, down to the atomic, down to the microscopic realm. Interstellar travel is the term used for hypothetical piloted or unpiloted travel between stars or planetary systems. Interstellar travel will be much more difficult than interplanetary spaceflight. The distances between the planets in the solar system are less than 30 astronomical units, whereas the distances between stars are typically hundreds of thousands of astronomical units, and usually expressed in light years. Because of the vastness of those distances, interstellar travel would require a high percentage of the speed of light, huge travel time, lasting from decades to millennia or longer, or a combination of both. The speeds required for interstellar travel in a human lifetime far exceed what current method of spacecraft propulsion can provide. Even with a hypothetically perfectly efficient propulsion system, the kinetic energy corresponding to those speeds is enormous by today's standards of energy production. Collisions by the spacecraft with cosmic dust and gas can produce very dangerous effects both to passengers and the spacecraft itself. A number of strategies have been proposed to deal with these problems, ranging from giant arcs that would carry entire societies and ecosystems to microscopic space probes. Many different spacecraft propulsion systems have been proposed to give spacecraft the required speeds, including nuclear propulsion, beam-powered propulsion, and methods based on speculative physics. As Dr. Michiko Kaku eloquently suggested, in most movies and films the aliens think just like us. They are territorial, they want to conquer, they want resources, they see humans as inferior. But you see, that's only a byproduct of our evolution. Look at other animals in the animal kingdom. Some animals are not territorial, they don't have to conquer. We have other paradigms in the animal kingdom which are totally different from the way our brain is constructed. But when we look at aliens in the movies, we are basically projecting our own consciousness in aliens. Our fears, our desires are projected, and they are a mirror of who we are, not a mirror of who they are. For hundreds of millennia, the territorial imperative gave stability to the small scattered communities of Homo sapiens, just as they do today in the small scattered populations of surviving hunter-gatherers. History is a bath of blood, wrote William James, whose 1906 anti-war essay is arguably the best ever written on the subject. Modern man inherits all the innate pugnancy and all the love, glory of his ancestors, showing war's irrationality and horror is of no effect on him. The horrors make the fascination. War is a strong life. It is life in extremis. War taxes are the only ones men never hesitate to pay, as the budgets of all nations show us. Our bloody nature, it can now be argued in the context of modern biology, is ingrained because group versus group competition was a principal driving force that made us what we are. In prehistory, group selection, that is competition between tribes instead of between individuals, lifted the hominids that became territorial carnivores to a height of solidarity, to genius, to enterprise, and to fear. Each tribe knew with justification that if it was not armed and ready, its very existence was impaired. Throughout history, the escalation of a large part of technologies has had combat as its central purpose. Today, the calendars of nations are punctuated by holidays to celebrate wars won and to perform memorial services for those who died waging them. Public support is best fired up by appeal to the emotions of deadly combat, over which the amygdala, a center for primary emotion in the brain, is grandmaster. We find ourselves in the battle to stem an oil spill, the fight to tame inflation, the war against cancer. Wherever there is an enemy, animate or inanimate, there must be a victory. You must prevail at the front, no matter how high the cost at home. Any excuse for a real war will do, so long as it is seen as necessary to protect the tribe. War, often accompanied by genocide, is not a cultural artifact of just a few societies, nor has it been an aberration of history, a result of the growing pains of our species' maturation. A series of researchers, starting with Jane Goodall, have documented the murders within chimpanzees groups. It turns out that chimpanzees and human hunter-gatherers and primitive farmers have about the same rates of death due to violent attacks within and between groups. But non-lethal violence is far higher in the chimps, occurring between 100 and possibly 1,000 times more often than in humans. The patterns of collective violence in which young chimp males engage are remarkably similar to those of young human males. They tend to avoid open mass confrontation with rival troops, instead relying on surprise attacks. There's no certain way to decide on the basis of existing knowledge whether chimpanzees and humans inherited their pattern of territorial aggression from a common ancestor, or whether they evolved it independently in response to parallel pressures of natural selection and opportunities encountered in the African homeland. So we will have to find within ourselves this ability to repel these inner forces and primal tribal forces and tendencies towards violence and being territorial. This is indeed a prerogative in order to move from type 0 to type 1, global peace, global conformity. And most likely any extraterrestrial alien civilization which will have to reach type 1 and even further, even more with type 2 and type 3, will have to have reached personal and global peace and have overcome war, at least within members of the same species. What we would be to them, that will be a critical point as far as their behavior towards us is concerned. So it is conceivable that some species will be territorial and will therefore have warriors and wars, but there might be other species that will not be territorial and will not even have the genes of territorial behavior. To such alien or extraterrestrial intelligence, the very concept of war and warriors will be alien. Alright, noble ones, I hope that you enjoyed this video, this scientific video. If you did, please remember, thumbs up, share it with your friends, share it with your cat. So what are your opinions on alien warriors, and do you think alien and intelligence and extraterrestrial intelligence exists in the cosmos? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.